Well, hello everybody and welcome back. Sorry if this video took a while to make, but nevertheless, it's finally here. Now before we get into the video, I just wanted to thank everyone for the massive growth for the channel. As I'm filming, we're so close to 1000 subscribers, and who knows, I might have already reached the milestone by the time this video is released. I don't want to drag on for too long though, so without further ado, it's time for the Hard to Find 4 Mods Iceberg, Part 2. USA States. USA States is a total overhaul mod that splits all of the North American states into their own countries. This is more of a sandbox mod, designed for fun over telling a narrative. L'Empereur. L'Empereur is an overhaul mod that is set in an alternate timeline where France won the Franco-Prussian War but failed to win World War I. This mod hasn't been released yet, so I won't go too deep into it. Krasnacht. Krasnacht is an alternate history mod set in the Kaiserreich universe where Germany lost the Second Weltkrieg and there is a new Cold War between Russia and the International. Once again, this mod isn't out yet, so information is limited. Hearts of Minecraft. Hearts of Minecraft is an overhaul mod set in the universe of, you guessed it, Minecraft. The mod revamps pretty much all of the graphics, making them Minecraft themed. Other than that, there's a new world map with new nations. Age of Imperialism. Age of Imperialism is an alternate history mod set in a universe where World War I never happened. As a result of this, smaller regional wars happened throughout Europe, which influenced the great powers. Roar of the Griffin. Roar of the Griffin is another alternate history mod where World War I was avoided. I won't go into the lore as it's basically the same as Age of Imperialism, and the mod itself seems to be lost/abandoned. Pax Ruthenia. Pax Ruthenia is an alternate history mod set in a world where the Russian Revolution failed, with the Bolsheviks fleeing to America. The US eventually falls to a communist revolution, and a reverse Cold War happens with the commie US against a capitalist Russia. This mod is also abandoned, with limited information about it online. Bring the War Home. Another mod that hasn't been released yet, Bring the War Home is an alternate history mod that is set in a world where the US collapses into a second civil war. Project X. Yet another unreleased mod, Project X, is set in an alternate 2060 where the US and USSR actually had great relations until 2020 when the actual Cold War would begin. Man in the High Castle. The Man in the High Castle is an alternate history mod based off of the book and the eventual TV series of the same name. The timeline tells of a story where the Axis utterly wins World War II, with the main focus being on the US as it is divided between Japan and Germany, as tensions continue to rise between the two superpowers. Sadly, however, this mod has been abandoned for some time now. Kalte Krieg. Like Krasnacht, Kalte Krieg is set in an alternate Kaiserreich universe and imagines what a Cold War scenario in the timeline would look like. However, it seems that this mod is still unreleased. North America Divided. Unlike USA States, North America Divided is set in a much worse Great Depression, one so bad that the Union dissolves, with every state becoming independent. Shortly after that, a revolution would happen in Mexico and Canada, also causing them to collapse into their own states. Back to Front. Back to Front is a historical overhaul mod for Hoi 4, aimed to deliver a more historically accurate and challenging experience. However, it seems this mod has been abandoned, as its Steam page has been completely blacked out. United No More. United No More is an unreleased mod set in a modern-day UK that collapses into a civil war. Reds a Revolutionary mod. Reds a Revolutionary mod is an unreleased mod that is set in an alternate universe where the Great Depression causes a socialist revolution in the US, with the Loyalists escaping to Cuba to set up a government in exile. 8 Years War of Resistance. 8 Years War of Resistance is a total overhaul mod centered around the Second Sino-Japanese War through World War II. Although it doesn't completely focus on just Asia, this mod greatly expands on it, adding more warlords, events, and general content for China and Japan. Rise of Italia. Rise of Italia used to be a very popular mod back in the day. However, I kid you not, I could not find any lore for this mod. The only thing the Steam Workshop has is this. Rise of Italia is set in an alternate history with many divergences from our own, with the US Constitution unratified and Napoleon dead at the hands of the Fourth Cut. Fuhrreich Imperial Nostalgia. Fuhrreich Imperial Nostalgia is sort of like Kaiser Redux, in which it combines the original Fuhrreich mod with many submods. Unification Wars. Unification Wars is set in an alternate timeline set in the 13th millennium, in which a devastating alien invasion has forced humanity to go underground with the hopes of one day rising up to claim the surface. The East Crisis. The East Crisis is an overhaul mod that is focused on the Russo-Ukrainian War, as it adds new tech, content, and a unique Ukrainian map. Era of Discovery. Era of Discovery is an overhaul mod set in the Middle Ages with new start dates, tech, and content for the time period. The Old Order. The Old Order is an alternate history mod from the TNL perspective that is set in a world where the Allies won World War II with very limited US support. Spartacus. Spartacus is an alternate history mod set in an alternate timeline where a much more successful Spartacus movement in Germany results in a communist revolution in 1932. However, this mod is still yet to be released. Fatherland. Fatherland is a Hoi 4 mod based off of the book of the same name, which envisions a world where Germany won World War II. This mod has been abandoned for some time though. Midnight Upon Us. Midnight Upon Us is an unreleased mod that is set in an alternate timeline where, due to the current Russo-Ukrainian war, World War III happens, which ends in a stalemate. The mod starts in the 22nd century with a war-torn world and old superpowers on the decline. Viva Le Roi. Viva Le Roi is an alternate history mod that is set in an alternate timeline where the French Revolution never happens. I won't go too deep into the lore, as the mod seems to be abandoned with no updates having been released since 2021. Empire. Hoi 4 Empire is an overhaul mod set in the year 1699. The mod is very ambitious as it plans to have content go well into the 1800s. However, it seems that won't be happening as this mod has been abandoned. The New Redux. First mod of the video that I couldn't actually find any internet information on. So if you have any ideas, make sure to comment it. Godspeed, A Flame for Winter. Godspeed, A Flame for Winter is an alternate history mod. Sadly, however, content for this mod is extremely limited, and I have no idea what it's actually about. Children of Dusk. Children of Dusk is set in an alternate world where World War III starts in the Pacific, causing the world to almost end from nuclear annihilation. Sadly, this mod has seemingly been abandoned, and content is limited to find. Fire of Poltava. Fire of Poltava is an alternate history mod set in a universe where the 2019 Ukrainian elections end up collapsing the country into a civil war between multiple factions. Red Liberty. Lore for this mod is kinda difficult to find as the Steam page doesn't seem to have anything, but Red Liberty seems to be an alternate history mod where World War I never happens, and as a result, the US elects communists in the 1932 election. Ash. Hearts of Iron Ash is an alternate history mod set in an alternate universe where, in the 1880s, mysterious vaults are found across the world containing futuristic alien technology. The empires of the world will harness this tech, and when World War I broke out in 1914, this alien tech would be used to destructive effect across Europe. And with no clear winner, by 1923, the world collapses, with natural disasters wiping out a third of humanity. Final Victory. Final Victory is an unreleased mod that asks the question, what if Napoleon won? I would love to go into the lore for this entry, but sadly, content is limited, as I couldn't really find much. Judgment Day. Aftermath of the Red Flood. Judgment Day Aftermath of the Red Flood is an alternate history mod set in the Red Flood universe about what the Cold War would look like in the universe following the collapse of Germany. The Coming Storm. The Coming Storm is an overhaul mod that adds 4 new start dates to the game: 1905, 1910, 1914, and 1918. While focusing mainly on World War I, it adds new tech, content, and focus trees for nations. Metro. Metro is an alternate history mod that is set in an alternate 2013, where a nuclear war wipes out humanity, with the only survivors being in the Moscow Metro underground. The mod adds a unique map and adds new politics in the Metro, as you must survive and invade. Honor and Glory. Honor and Glory is an alternate history mod set in a timeline where Sweden won the Great Northern War against Russia. As a result of this, they stayed as a prominent power in the world, even going into the 1930s. Sadly though, this mod has been abandoned. Another World. Another World is a mod set in an alternate universe where in 1388, meteor showers darkened the world for decades, resulting in the collapse of empires, and by the 1980s, the world is significantly behind tech-wise. World War Zero. World War Zero is an alternate history mod set in a universe where in 2063, a meteor would hit the North Pole, causing natural disasters and mass flooding. By 2101, the world has somewhat recovered, but a massive war is now on the horizon over resources. Rise of China. Literally couldn't find anything for this entry. The only thing that seems to be a Rise of China mod is a video on YouTube. Viva Respublica. Viva Respublica is an alternate history mod that is set in a timeline where the 1848 revolutions were more widespread and successful. As a result of this, many European monarchies will be deposed, with republics being formed by the late 1800s. Capital. Content for this mod seems to be limited, but from what I can see, Capital is an alternate history mod where Karl Marx was an anarcho-capitalist, with his new ideology being the main far-left ideology instead of communism. Tales of Ba Sing Se. Tales of Ba Sing Se is a mod with very limited info, but it seems to be a mod in the Avatar universe. Escalation 84. Escalation 84 is one of the strangest mods in this iceberg. In 1982, the Cold War goes hot as the world is quickly consumed by a nuclear winter. In a last-ditch effort to survive, the Soviets and the Americans go through their own one-way portal which leads them to the Equestria at War universe. Yeah, I'm not joking. The ponies now need to deal with a whole different race coming to the world and to choose between capitalism and the US or communism and the Soviets. Hermits at War. Hermits at War is an overhaul mod that is set in the Hermitcraft universe from Minecraft. While I'm personally not too knowledgeable on the series here on YouTube, this seems to be a pretty faithful mod. Charm Stellis. I couldn't find anything on this mod except for a lone Reddit post. The Tale of Two Brothers. The Tale of Two Brothers is an alternate history mod that is set in a timeline where Kaiser Wilhelm kept good relations with Britain, never starting a naval race. Because of this, when World War I broke out, Britain would be in the Central Powers, which would cause them to easily win the war. During the interwar period, Italy and France would fall to fascism, causing them to go on the road to war once more. Frostpunk. Frostpunk is an alternate history mod set in a universe where Germany utterly wins World War I. As the British Empire is collapsing, many people escape to Iceland, where different mining companies have set up from nations to compete with each other and control the island. Black Gold Burning. Black Gold Burning is an alternate history mod that asks the question, what if the 1973 oil crisis was much worse? As a result of this, the Cold War becomes a lot more hot, with Soviets and Americans competing for control in the Middle East, the Yom Kippur War being much worse, and the Vietnam War completely breaking down. Basically, this is kinda a worst-case scenario for the later part of the Cold War. Red Knight. Red Knight is an alternate history mod based off the Kaiserreich universe that asks the question, what if Germany lost the Second Weltkrieg? Sadly, this mod hasn't been released yet, so I can't go into it. Iranthar, City of Hate. Iranthar, City of Hate is an overhaul mod that is set in a sort of sandbox fantasy universe where you get to take control of a kingdom in a unique realm. The Price of Freedom. The Price of Freedom is an alternate history mod that is set in an alternate universe where the US collapsed after the Civil War grinded to a stalemate. I'd love to go into the lore of this mod, but it sadly hasn't been released. Wild Wild World. This entry only goes to a lone Reddit post that says that this mod is a sub-mod for Red World. Unfortunately, I can't find anything else about this. Rivers of Blood. Rivers of Blood is an alternate history mod set in a timeline where the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth managed to stay independent for far longer than in our timeline, up until 1823. This in turn caused the Russian Empire to be much weaker and for them to get curb-stomped in World War I even harder than in our timeline. This ultimately led to total collapse. TNO A New Millennium. TNO A New Millennium is a continuation of the TNO mod, expanding the timeline and the start date of the game to the year 2000. A lot has changed in 60 years. The German Civil War resulted in Albert Speer gaining power, and in the East, the Soviets have reformed. Palpatine's Gamble. Really surprised this entry is this low on the iceberg. Palpatine's Gamble is a total overhaul mod that is set in the Star Wars universe, with unique tech, a new galaxy map, and new content. This mod is probably the closest thing we will get to Stellaris and Hoi 4. Hearts of Durasteel. Hearts of Durasteel is a cancelled Star Wars themed mod that is set before Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Cold War mod. Not sure what this could mean, as we have already covered the Cold War mod. The Union Forever. Another abandoned mod, the Union Forever seems to be a TNO submod, with content for it being very hard to find. The New Millennium. Absolutely no idea what this mod could be, I could not find anything on it. Balefire Blues. Balefire Blues is a crossover of the Equestria War mod and the Old World Blues mod, combining My Little Pony and Fallout. From what I can see, this mod has lots of love and attention put into it. Everywhere at the End of Time. Everywhere at the End of Time is an alternate history mod that is set in a universe where NATO disbanded in 1950, following disagreements with the countries of the Alliance. Content is limited for this mod, and I couldn't find much. Ashes of Libertad. No idea why this is here since we already covered this entry, as it is in level 3. Lux Germani. This entry is just another name for the AEIOU mod, which we already covered in part 1. Long and Happy Life. Long and Happy Life is a cancelled alternate history mod that is set in a timeline where in the early 2000s, many extremist ideologies will go mainstream once more. Sadly, that's all I could find for this mod, as it seems to have been abandoned a long time ago. Historic Geographical Overhaul. Once again, this is a graphics mod and not an overhaul mod, so I don't know why it's on this iceberg. Land of the Free. Land of the Free is an alternate history mod that is set in a universe where the US collapses into a sort of warlord era following the Great Depression and a failed socialist revolution. Clash of the Eagles. Another cancelled mod, Clash of the Eagles is an alternate history mod set in another world where Italy actually is competent in World War II, resulting in the Axis doing far better than in our timeline. In 1944, as the Soviets finally get pushed behind the Urals and collapse, Germany declares themselves as the masters of Europe, basically giving Italy the middle finger. This of course now puts the Axis on the road to civil war. Rise of the Eagle. I couldn't find anything for this mod except a vague Reddit post. The Silent Bells. Another seemingly cancelled mod. I couldn't find anything for this except for a Reddit post. It seems this mod is just another Axis victory from what I can see. The Death of Honor. I couldn't find much for this entry, but Death of Honor seems to be an alternate history mod where the US collapsed following the Great Depression. Blitzkrieg Hearts of Steel. Blitzkrieg Hearts of Steel is a cancelled historical overhaul mod that starts the game in 1932 and adds new historical elements and content to up the difficulty. The Versailles. This entry just refers to the Gates of Versailles mod, which we already covered. Twilight of Anthropocene. Twilight of Anthropocene is an alternate history mod set in a timeline where the Cold War was much more unstable, with the Nazis collapsing into anarchy in 1943, Vietnam being nuked twice, and the Soviets never collapsing. By 2021, the world is more unstable than ever, as it drifts closer to nuclear war. Pax Mongolica. Pax Mongolica is an unreleased mod set in a universe where the Mongol Empire never collapsed. Once again, I can't go into the lore of this mod, as it's hard to find. Victory of the Dual Monarchy. Victory of the Dual Monarchy is a mod set in an alternate timeline where Austria-Hungary was far more competent in the Great War. As a result of this, there is a new Cold War between Austria and Germany as they both compete for power over a war-torn Europe. Victoria and El Alamo. Victoria and El Alamo is a cancelled mod set in an alternate universe where the US lost the 1846 US-Mexican War. As a result of this, the US goes down a far more unstable path than in our timeline. I wish I could go into more detail, but sadly I couldn't find much. Operation Unthinkable Red Surge. Operation Unthinkable Red Surge is a mod set in an alternate timeline where the Allies go through with Operation Unthinkable in 1947, invading the Soviets and the Eastern Bloc. This goes terribly for them, as in just 1 year the Soviets pushed the British and the Americans out of Europe, with an uneasy peace following. Now the Soviets' new Warsaw Pact stretches all the way from Romania to France. Revolution Plaid the Sea. Revolution Plaid the Sea isn't actually a Hoifor mod, but a full alternate history timeline about what if Latin America was a great power. For that reason, I won't go into this entry, as the idea never made it into Hearts of Iron. Fallen Eagle. The Fallen Eagle is an alternate history mod set in a world where World War I never happens. I won't go into this mod fully, as it seems to be abandoned, and it's the same as all the other What If World War I Never Happened mods. Timeline 191. Timeline 191 is an alternate history mod set in the universe of Harry Turtledove's book series, Southern Victory, which is already a mod that we covered earlier. Mittelmacht. Mittelmacht is an abandoned mod set in an alternate world where King Umberto of Italy was never assassinated, leading them to remain in the Central Powers in World War I. Furthermore, Britain never joined the war in 1914 when Belgium got invaded, but instead joined far too late in 1917. The Central Powers soon went after that, and the Alliance became the new strongest one in Europe. Faded Neon. The Faded Neon is an alternate history mod set in an alternate 1983, where a virus having been released 20 years ago ravages the globe, killing about a third of humanity. As a result, the entire Cold War was temporarily put on hold. But now, the virus is beginning to fade out, the nations of the world are on the brink of war once more. Iron Grip. Iron Grip is another unreleased Axis Victory mod. I won't go into it as it's basically the same as what we've seen before. Stahlvorhang. Stahlvorhang is an abandoned mod that asks the question, what if the Berlin-Moscow Axis actually went through? Ignoring the fact that this completely goes against the Nazi ideology, them and the Soviets sweep Britain and France, ultimately leading them to be victorious over Europe. Now, disagreements are beginning to show between the two allies as they drift further apart. War of the Worlds. Based off the novels by H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds brings the book into the game by creating a Martian invasion that you can either join or defend against. Sadly though, this mod hasn't been updated since 2022. Avatar: The Last Airbender. Unlike Tales of Ba Sing Se, Avatar: The Last Airbender is a fully fledged total conversion mod that takes the game into the Avatar universe. It adds new graphics, focus trees, and content all from Avatar. Twilight Struggle. I couldn't find much for this entry. The only thing this could be is a TNO submod or an Equestria at War expansion. Boz-Koz Polska. Boz-Koz Polska is an alternate history mod that asks the question, what if Poland was a superpower? Basically, in this timeline, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth never collapses, and as a result, they become the main superpower in Eastern Europe, instead of Russia, like in our timeline. Sadly, this mod seems to have been abandoned. Bismarck Reich. Bismarck Reich is an alternate history mod where Bismarck was killed in Britain in 1870 during the Franco-Prussian War, and as a result of this, Britain joined France and crushed Prussia, leading them to never form the German Empire. By 1945, which is when the game starts, Prussia is looking for revenge for what happened in 1871. TNO 4chan Redux. I have no clue what this is, but it seems to be 4chan trying to do a redux of TNO, if that makes sense. Dead Men Marching. Dead Men Marching is yet another unreleased Axis Victory mod. Basically, this is what if the Allies were extremely dumb. The US rolls over after Pearl Harbor and signs a peace deal with Japan, and Britain gets sea-lioned. America Imperial. America Imperial is an alternate history mod set in a world where the US industrializes much faster and is a lot more interventionalist. As a result of this, the American Civil War spreads to South America as nations have to pick between the Union or the Confederacy. ACW. ACW, or American Civil War, is an overhaul mod that brings Hoi 4 into the Civil War. It overhauls tech, content, and focus trees and has a unique North America map. This mod sadly has also been abandoned. Calm Before the Storm. A mod that used to be very popular back in the day, Calm Before the Storm is a total overhaul mod that starts Hoi 4 in the year 1933, as it adds content all the way to 1948. And yes, this mod hasn't received any updates since 2020. Shadows over Europe. Shadows over Europe is an alternate history mod set in a world where World War I ends in a stalemate. As a result of this, in 1919, Germany falls to a Spartacist revolution, with the rest of Europe in turn turning to the right. Other than that, the prestige of many nations have been hit, as millions have died for seemingly nothing, and for now, the future remains uncertain. The Fading Suns. This just seems to be another Axis Victory mod that was never released. Imperial Saeculum. Imperial Saeculum is a mod on the ModDB website that is set in an alternate 1888 where the American Revolution failed. As a result of this, Spain somewhat keeps its colonial empire, Germany never forms, and France and Britain are still staunch rivals. Old Europe 1300. Old Europe 1300 is a mod that starts Hoi 4 in, you guessed it, 1300. It overhauls focus trees, tech, and content to all be correct to the time period. Red Dusk. Red Dusk is a work-in-progress mod that is set in an alternate timeline where the August coup in 1991 succeeded, and as a result, the Soviet Union lives on to the 21st century. I would love to go more into this entry as it looks interesting, but sadly, I couldn't find much. World Ablaze. Once again, really surprised that this entry is this low on this iceberg. World Ablaze is a very popular historical overhaul mod for Hoi 4 that improves on just about everything from vanilla. This also comes with a negative side effect of being extremely difficult to play. Prometheus Has Fallen. Prometheus Has Fallen is a mod that is set in an alternate universe where the Entente, minus the US, do extremely poor in the war. The British invade the Netherlands, which makes the US lean towards the Germans. By 1918, the US is fully supporting the Central Powers, and although they never joined the war, when the Entente surrender, the final conference is hosted in Washington. Decades of turmoil. I couldn't find anything at all for this entry. Finis Omnis Spe. Finis Omnis Spe is a submod for Extremis Ultimus about Nazi Texans in the Second American Civil War. For that reason, I won't go into this entry. Seven Colors. Seven Colors is an alternate history mod set in a fantasy world where different countries are colored based off of 7 ideologies, with different lore for each one. I won't go too deep into this entry, as the mod seems to have not been released. TNO Reddit Redux. No idea what this entry could be. As far as I know, Reddit never tried to redux TNO. Torture the Protectorate. I couldn't find any lore for this mod, but it seems to have been set in an alternate world where Polish Lithuania lived on until the 20th century, but collapsed after World War I. Revolution Realized. Couldn't find anything for this mod, except an old Reddit thread. The Greatest Story Ever Told. Couldn't find much for this entry, but it seems to have been a submod to TNO, based off of a book with the same name. Sadly though, this mod never seems to have been released. Springtime in Europe. Springtime in Europe is an unreleased mod set in an alternate post-World War II where Europe has become divided into 3 power blocks. The British with their futurist ideology, the reactionary governments of Italy and France, and the National Socialists of Germany. The main focus of this mod was to pick a side and dominate Europe. Pax von der Weltkrieg. The only thing I could find for this mod is some old Reddit posts. And yeah, I'll let you decide what the lore for this mod could have possibly been. Warlord Era. Warlord Era is a historical overhaul mod that starts the play in 1919, following the collapse of the Beiyang government, as you focus on picking a Chinese state and attempting to reunify the nation, while dealing with Japan. Unfortunately, it seems that this mod has been long abandoned. Darwinreich. The only thing I could find for this mod is an abandoned subreddit with only a few posts on it. Polarnacht. Polarnacht, or Dawn of Snowstorm, is an unreleased mod set in an alternate timeline where the German 1848 revolution succeeded. As a result of this, many monarchies of Europe would be deposed as liberal and nationalist governments took over. World War I, because of all this, was a lot more worse, which ultimately saw an Entente defeat. However, this didn't mean all that well for Germany, as a sluggish post-war economy and instability caused a Bolshevik revolution to rise up in 1933, which ultimately took over. Red Typhoon. Red Typhoon is an alternate history mod set in the Equestria at War universe, where the communists and the Equestrians won the Great War. I don't know too much about the Equestria War timeline, so this is where I'm going to leave it. Legacy of the Past. An unreleased submod for the Hearts of Minecraft mod. Legacy of the Past adds 5 new nations to the world following the collapse of the Holy Minor Empire. Eternal Golden Dawn. An unreleased mod, Eternal Golden Dawn is set in an alternate timeline where, instead of a post-war economic boom following World War I, the end of the Great War would usher in mass technological development, with retro-futuristic tech being the norm by the late 30s. Weimar Reich. Weimar Reich is an unreleased mod set in an alternate timeline where the Weimar Republic never dissolved. Other than that though, I couldn't find much from this mod. The Union Forever, Sherman's Nightmare. Pretty sure this mod might have already been on this iceberg, but I'm going to briefly go over it again anyway. The Union Forever is an unreleased alternate history mod set in a world where the American Civil War leads to the collapse of the Union and Confederacy. Other than that, I couldn't find much for this entry. 2040. A seemingly unreleased mod, 2040 is an alternate history mod set in an alternate 2040s, where Trump getting re-elected in 2024 results in the collapse of NATO and the EU, as well as even the United Nations. Age of Collapse. Age of Collapse is an unreleased alternate history mod set in a timeline where Germany won World War II. It's kinda inspired by the Fallout universe, as fashion never really aged that well from the 1950s, and the main game actually starts in the 2050s. Caesar Reich. Caesar Reich is an abandoned alternate history mod set in an alternate universe where the US joins Germany in 1917, but still with the Entente winning. As a result of this, a much more far-right government takes over in Italy, even worse than Benito Mussolini. And in 1937, they proclaimed the restoration of the Roman Empire. Emperor of the World. Originally a creation by Kaiser 1871, the same person who made Red World, Emperor of the World is an unreleased mod that is set in a world where Napoleon won. It's basically the same as Après Moi Deluge, so I won't go too deep into it. Razda is an alternate history mod set in the Kaiserreich universe where the International and Russia were victorious over the Reichspakt. Unfortunately, it seems this mod was abandoned and never released. Pride and Fall is an alternate history mod set in an alternate timeline where the 2020s were the downfall of humanity. The pandemic was much worse and NATO as well as the EU was disbanded, and ultimately a nuclear war would start. The game takes place in Poland, which has been fractured completely since the Germans invaded. Pierced Wings, another unreleased mod with limited info. Pierced Wings is set in an alternate timeline where the Grand Alliance won the Spanish War of Succession. Red Winter is an unreleased mod set in an alternate timeline where Zhukov took control of the Soviet Union instead of Khrushchev following Stalin's death. As a result of this, the Cuban Missile Crisis escalates into World War III. Instead of nuclear war ensuing, the Russians just blitz the American West Coast and crush NATO. Knots and Barbed Wire proposes a very interesting alternate history mod in which Africa would go on to become the dominant continent in the world, colonizing not only Europe but America. Sadly though, this mod was abandoned and never released. Crossover World is set in an alternate fantasy world where forgotten TV show characters live. Although this might seem like a meme mod at first, Crossover actually has a pretty hardline following. Sons of Morbius is an overhaul mod set in the Sonic universe, complete with all the lore. Sadly, it seems this mod has been abandoned. Steel Curtain couldn't find much at all for this entry, but it seems to be a lost, unreleased mod about what if Operation Unthinkable happened. Silver Skies, another mod with no info on it. I couldn't find anything. The Road to 60, Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, for a bit of context, what is with my previous video on Road to 69? Used to be a dev for Road to 69. I heard the mod server got hacked and the owner offed himself. Truly such a sad end to a great mod. What the fuck? Is this like some kind of inside joke that I wasn't let in on? Well, Road to 69 is apparently just a mashup of mods, but I think this entry could be referring to an unreleased mod that goes by the same name. Rule Britannia could be referring to either two things. It could be referring to a mod collection or an unreleased abandoned mod about what if the British were a lot more successful in colonizing the world. Blue World, another abandoned mod. Blue World seems to be an alternate history mod from the Red World perspective about what if NATO won the Cold War. You know, like in our timeline. Minutes to Midnight is an abandoned old history mod about what if Germany won World War II. That's all I could find about this. Luxembourg Reich, another meme mod. Luxembourg Reich is an alternate history mod set in a timeline where Luxembourg just kicked everyone's ass in World War I. Sadly, it seems this mod has been abandoned. Scenario Stalingrad. Pretty surprised this entry is this far down. Scenario Stalingrad is an overhaul mod that zooms the map into the Volga and into the Battle of Stalingrad, as you must choose to either fight for the motherland or the fatherland. Cursed Days, an abandoned mod. Cursed Days seems to be set in an alternate world where the Cold War went hot, and following a short nuclear exchange, the Soviets would control all of mainland Europe. Project Ulysses is an alternate history mod that brings Hoi 4 into the universe of Ace Combat with unique nations, tech, and a new world map. 1 Year War. Like Project Ulysses, 1 Year War brings Hoi 4 into a different series, Gundam. I don't know too much on the fandom, so I won't go too deep into the lore, but basically, this mod revamps everything to be in the universe of Gundam. Fall of the Free. I couldn't find much on this mod, but it seems to be a Soviet Cold War victory mod. Foxhole. This mod is mostly in Russian, so I might get some things wrong here, but Foxhole seems to be an overhaul mod that brings Hoi 4 into the Foxhole game. Stalemate, The Frozen War. A very old mod, Stalemate, The Frozen War is an alternate history mod set in a world where World War I ended in a stalemate. Sadly, this mod has been abandoned for years now, with everything being pulled down from the Steam Workshop. The Dying Revolution. A seemingly unreleased mod, The Dying Revolution is set in an alternate universe where Trotsky comes into power instead of Stalin, and as a result of this, the Soviet Union goes on to live into the 2030s. Okay, here we go. Finally, we have reached the final level, so let's get into it. HGOLI. I think this is just another states mod, so we won't go over it. The Meme Order, The Last Days of TNO. This entry just seems to be a meme mod based around TNO, and unfortunately, it seems to have been long abandoned. Aftermath, The Axis Victorious. This used to be a very old German victory mod for Hoi 4 that has been abandoned for years now. Pobeda 1946. Pobeda 1946 is an unreleased mod set in a timeline where D-Day failed. As a result of this, Soviet control of Europe would be far more powerful than in our timeline, and Britain would be more isolated than ever. Big fucking asteroid Reich. The only thing I could find for this mod is an old Reddit post, but it seems to be an old history mod set in a timeline where a massive asteroid would hit Europe during World War I, causing humanity to go extinct. Sinus Romanum. Another abandoned mod, Sinus Romanum is an alternate history mod set in a world where Europe would Latinize. That's pretty much all I could find. Darkest Hour, Final Days of Europa. Couldn't find much for this entry, but it seems to be an abandoned alternate history mod set in the Führerreich timeline about what if Germany won World War II. 1971, Ashes of the Old Order. Info for this entry is hard to come by, but it seems to be an alternate history mod set in a timeline where the US collapsed in the late 1960s, with the Soviets following soon after. Love Thy Neighbor. A seemingly abandoned mod, Love Thy Neighbor is set in an alternate timeline where a global pandemic kills billions of people following World War II, and by the time the 80s come around, the world has been ravaged by wars and famine as resources are beginning to dwindle out. Nixon's Folly. A sort of joke mod that was never released, Nixon's Folly seems to just be meme leaders slowly taking over each nation. If that makes sense. Die Großen Krieg. A very ambitious mod, sorta like End of a New Beginning, Die Großen Krieg is an overhaul mod that starts in the year 1900 and plans to cover content leading all the way up to 1948. Unfortunately, this mod seems to have been abandoned, as I couldn't find any recent updates online. Russia Without Revolutions. I couldn't find anything at all for this mod, as the only link leads to an Era 404 page, but it seems to be an old history mod about what if the Russian Empire never collapsed. Bayernreich. An old abandoned mod, Bayernreich seems to be an alternate history mod set in a world where a communist Bavaria broke free from the German Empire in the closing days of World War I and managed to beat back an invasion as well as secure their independence. Wunder Ash. Wunder Ash is an abandoned mod about what if Germany won World War II. It's basically what you would expect, so I won't go into it. Millennium Dusk. An unreleased mod, Millennium Dusk is set in an alternate universe where the 2008 economic crisis was much worse and resulted in the US Civil War and their ultimate collapse. Ikigai. Ikigai is an abandoned mod set in a world where the East was much more stronger than the West, as they would go on to colonize vast parts of the Americas, the Pacific, and even parts of Russia and Africa. Wacky Zara's Fuckery. All I could find for this entry is an abandoned subreddit. If anyone has any idea what the lore could possibly be for this mod, then please let me know in the comments. Fallen Liberty. Fallen Liberty seems to be an abandoned mod about what if the American Civil War ended in a stalemate. That's all I could find for this entry. Well, we have finally made it to the end of the video. Thanks all so much for watching, and especially thanks for getting the channel to 1,000 subscribers. I'm sorry if a lot of the entries didn't have too much depth in them, as unfortunately info for some of the mods were really hard to come by. But thanks so for watching once again. I should be returning to the normal upload schedule, so make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss out on my 1,000 subscriber special. I've got something good planned. Other than that, I'll see you guys later.